Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and once again it's time for another breakfast chat. And today we're going to talk a little bit about the bench press, which is ironically my least favorite lift. So it's one of these topics that we see all the time. You'll see bodybuilders in particular will talk about how the bench press doesn't build the chest, and there's so many better exercises for building the chest in spite of all the evidence to the contrary, the biomechanics, plenty of experts who are themselves bodybuilders who say no, it's a phenomenal chest exercise, right? They'll say this, but then they have no clue which muscles are lifting the weight. They can't explain how the weight is being lifted if it's not the chest involved. They can't tell you what muscles are actually doing it. And then when you watch most of these guys bench, it's like, well, it's no wonder you struggle with chest development off this lift. They go out of their way to bench press in such a way to try their hardest to take the chest out of the movement. And again, fascinating to behold. And now a lot of people will say, Jason, well, you're a power lifter, you're biased towards the bench press. Yeah, except that I'm not good at bench. Genetically, my worst lift. You guys have never seen me bench more than 352. And compared to my other lifts, that's pretty weak. Right? I have elite numbers on other lifts. I don't have them on the bench. So, and I have clients who outbench me. I can coach the bench. It's just not genetically my strong suit. So I have every reason in the world to be biased against the bench press. And in times in the past I have been. But when you really look at it, if you're going to be intellectually honest, we can't say, oh, because I don't like a lift or because I suck at it, it's not good for an intended role. That's not how this works. It's not how it works. And, again, when you ask these guys, well, people are moving a lot of weight on the bench press to a pretty long range of motion, right? They're like, yeah. Well, what muscles are lifting the weight? And again, this crowd is always interesting, this particular demographic. They don't do logic well. They'll say things like, well, with that heavy weight, it's the connective tissue and stuff lifting. It's leverages and connective tissue. And it's like, that doesn't lift weight. Okay? Leverages allow great leverages, which usually means limb lengths, how long your arms and legs are. Let's get over to what we mean by leverages. What guys have great leverages for big lifts? Short guys. Incidentally, most bodybuilders are short too. Most bodybuilders are way below average height. Successful bodybuilders are short. They have the leverages. What are they talking about? They have great leverages for these lifts. Most bodybuilders are short with relatively short arms. That's perfect leverages for the bench. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. They should be able to outbench me with no trouble. With less training years. So they'll say these things, but then they think of leverages themselves can lift weight. Or they're like, well, the tendons. It's like, no, even if we're talking about 5 rep sets, 10 rep sets, not just 1 rep maxes, what muscles are lifting the weight? And they ignore the biomechanics. It says the pectorals are the primary movers, with a lot of extra help from the anterior deltoids and the triceps. Ironically enough, the bench press doesn't build particularly great triceps. But working on your triceps improves your bench press. It's a whole other topic having to do with rep ranges. But that actually is because as reps go higher, which is where we do most of our volume for hypertrophy, chest activation goes up and we use a little bit less anterior deltoid and less tricep. When we max out, the ratios shift slightly. In other words, when doing a 1 rep max, you actually do use less chest as a ratio relative to your delts and triceps. And there's data out there on this. And as reps go up, particularly you start hitting 8+ reps, the pectorals are actually doing the lion's share of the work. So again, you come over to that point, maybe you should be using slightly higher reps. Maybe you shouldn't be doing doubles and triples all day on the bench if you're trying to build your chest. I'm not saying they can't do it because they're still the primary mover, right? Still the primary mover. But you'll get a little more bang for your buck with a little more reps. And again, there's interesting data showing that out there. But you ask them, well, what's moving the weight? Like, well, the deltoid or the triceps. And it's like, Well, again, then bench pressing should be all you need for triceps. You know, these same guys who will say the bench isn't good because these other muscles are doing the work, why aren't you using the bench press for those muscles then? Why aren't you using the bench press as your main shoulder exercise? Why aren't you using it as your main tricep exercise? Well, because it doesn't work that great for doing that. Because it's a chest movement. It's a chest movement first and foremost. Otherwise, if a guy could come in and bench 275 for 10 reps, right? Which probably means he's pretty close. He's closing out on a 400 bench. He's benching at least 365 for a max then. Why can't the same guy overhead press the same amount? If it's a deltoid, front deltoid exercise, why can't they overhead press the same amount then? Well, guys who have really big delts and no chest might be pretty close, actually. Because they're not using their chest, so therefore they lift a lot less weight. Because the chest isn't as involved in the overhead press. That's why. You know, and if that's the case too, if it's all the deltoids, why aren't they able to do 10 rep sets with front raises with a 100-pound dumbbell in each hand? Front delt exercise, your delts are that strong. They're doing all the work. It'd be the same with triceps. We can change the bench to where it becomes more tricep dominant by bringing the grip in. The chest still gets worked. It just gets worked less in a ratio. But then you look at a lot of these guys bench, and then you can see why they think the bench isn't hitting their chest hard, right? How many of them, when they bench, first of all, they're flat back, no arch. What do we know from the data? That arching actually seems to improve chest recruitment. And I'm not talking about crazy arches that a tiny percentage, little bitty tiny percentage of powerlifters do. Most people can't do that, where you're only moving the bar 4 or 5 inches, right? Most people are not built to do that. I can't do that. But arching, at least some arch, has been shown to be number 1, safer on your shoulders, right? Number 2, recruits more pecs. What else you see them do? They won't grip it wide enough. Sometimes they'll bring the grip in, trying to take a little bit of emphasis off the pecs, and then they bounce it off their chest. You know, and that's also comical. You'll watch this whole group of people, and again, I like to criticize bodybuilders because they're ridiculous. They'll talk about full range of motion and squeezing and contracting and all this nonsense, right? But then you watch them train, that's not what they do. You'll watch a lot of them bench. What does their bench look like? Bouncing it off their chest. They're actually using momentum. So again, we're not getting the eccentric rep, no control on the eccentric, which again is useful for hypertrophy. And instead of pausing on the chest and then using the chest to explode out of the bottom from the point where the pecs have the greatest amount of mechanical tension, which is at the bottom, right? They just bounce it so that they can use a bounce to try to take their chest out of the movement. And they'll do it with a flat back on top of it. They'll do all this nonsense, and then it's a terrible chest exercise. You're going out of your way to make it a terrible chest exercise. You're actually working really hard to de-emphasize your chest on this movement while then complaining that it's not a good chest exercise. And you go look at some of the other guys who are in the bodybuilding world, who are experts with degrees in the field, like Dr. Mike Israetel. I don't even know his like. Jeff Nipper, they'll tell you, no, the bench press is one of the best, if not the best chest exercise. They both have big pecs. And I'm not ever saying the bench is the only thing you should do. So, we come up and say, hey, this exercise is great for a muscle. No one is hopefully interpreting that as, oh, he's saying that's all you should ever do. Because I always tell you guys, what is the best exercise for any given muscle group? Because we care about hypertrophy and strength, right? We need to be as big as possible. It raises our strength ceiling. What's the best way to grow a muscle? What's the best exercise? To do 2 different good exercises. To do 2 different good exercises for a muscle is the best exercise. Right? You want to hit it from a couple different angles. You end up with more complete muscle fiber recruitment throughout the whole muscle if you do that. It's much better. Just do a couple different movements. You can combine that bench press with a dip, right? Combine it with some dumbbell pressing. Combine it with an incline. all of those things work. Combine the two together. Now you have a really good pair of exercises for the chest. It'll get even bigger if you program it all correctly. All right, guys. Well, that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.